The market of chains asterisk, the air smelled like smoke, grease, and fear, and Dax hated it. Zeltriax was a city of trade and shadows, where no one asked questions and no one gave mercy. Rusted ships lined the landing ports while creatures from 100 worlds walked the cracked streets. Dax pulled his hood low and moved deeper into the market, careful not to meet anyone's eyes. Today, he had only one credit chip in his pocket. The last of his money, he could have used it to buy food or fuel, but he was not here for that. He was here because he heard whispers about a cage filled with rare slaves with ears and tails like cats, slaves being sold for meat. He passed a stall where a fat butcher hacked at something purple and steaming. Next to him, a cage shook with movement. Dax's eyes locked onto the figures inside, 2 girls, young alien and terrified. Their fur-covered ears twitched at every sound, and their tails were pulled tight around their bodies. Fresh catch. The seller grinned with yellow teeth, cat girls from the border colonies. Tender meat or exotic pets, depends on the buyer. Dax said nothing. He stepped closer. His hand trembled slightly, not from fear, but from something deeper, something older. He remembered another cage. Long ago. Back when he was a soldier. Back when he failed to save them. The younger girl mewled softly. Her eyes wide and glowing met his. She pressed her face to the bars and whispered, "Please?" Dax reached into his coat and held up the chip. "All I've got," he said. The seller laughed. "That's not even half the price, human. I'll throw in my sidearm," Dax replied, unholstering the worn blaster and tossing it onto the table. "Take it or I walk." The butcher leaned over and examined the weapon. He nodded slowly. "Fine. They're yours, but if they die on the way home." "Not my problem." The gate buzzed open. Dax stepped in and gently lifted the older one first. She was light as air, her breathing shallow. The younger clung to him, shaking. "You're not going to eat us, are you?" she asked in a small voice. "No," Dax said. "I'm getting you out of here." Behind him, someone muttered, "Fool." He ignored it and kept walking. Carrying both girls through the twisted alleys of Zeltriax, the streets narrowed, the lights flickered, and the shadows felt thicker. Somewhere far behind, a deep voice growled. "They won't last the night." He reached a service door, kicked it open, and slipped inside. It was an old repair station, unused and forgotten. He had slept here before. Back when he first arrived on this lawless world, he laid the older girl on a blanket and turned to the younger. "What's your name?" he asked. "Zari," she whispered. "She's Lyra, my sister." Lyra's eyes blinked open slightly. She winced in pain but didn't speak. Dax checked their ankles, electronic cuffs, badly bruised. He used a rusted toolkit to snap the locks off. Then he gave them water, what little he had, and wrapped them in a thermal sheet. "You're safe now," he said. Zari stared at him, her eyes full of doubt. "They told us humans eat our kind," Dax sighed. "Not all humans are monsters, but you're broke. And now you gave up your last credits," Zari said. "Why?" He didn't answer at first. He looked at Lyra, then Zari. And something settled in his chest, something heavy but calm. "'Cause I didn't save them before," he finally said. "And I'm not failing again." The sound of footsteps echoed. Outside, Dax quickly shut off the lights and motioned them to be quiet. Zari clung to her sister, trembling again. Through a cracked panel, Dax saw 2 shadows pass. One of them sniffed the air. "They came this way," it said. Voice sharp and cruel, the other hissed. "We wait until morning. He can't hide them forever." Dax waited until the footsteps faded. Then he turned back to the sisters. "We don't have much time." Lyra spoke at last, her voice hoarse. "You shouldn't have done this." "No," Dax replied. "But I did," Zari whispered. "They'll come back. Let them," Dax said, checking the power cell in his backup knife. "I may be broke, but I'm not helpless." The wind howled outside, carrying the cries of Dessert, the market, and the sharp scent of burning oils. Inside the tiny shelter, the 2 alien girls huddled close together. And Dax sat beside them, eyes open, ears alert, and heart steady. For the first time in years, he had a reason to fight again, and no one, not slavers, not butchers, not killers, would take them from him. Hunted in the alleys, the scream came first. Sharp and panicked, cutting through the night like a knife. Dax threw himself over the two girls just before the blast tore through the side wall of the shelter. Sparks flew, metal groaned, and smoke choked the air. Zari screamed, and Lyra covered her with her weak arms. Dax pulled them both to the ground and hissed, "Stay down," through the swirling dust. Figures appeared, tall, armored, and glowing. In patches, bounty enforcers, but not official ones. These were mercenaries. The kind who didn't ask questions, just followed credits. The kind sent to clean up mistakes like runaway slaves. One of them stepped forward, visor scanning. "Thermal trail ends here," he growled. "He's inside." Dax checked his blade and rolled to the side. He couldn't take them head on, not with the girls behind him. He crawled through a cracked pipe leading into the next room. It reeked of coolant and rot, but it gave him a second to think. They had found him faster than expected. Someone must have tracked the chip, or maybe the seller set him up. Either way, they weren't going to leave empty-handed. He moved fast, setting off a crude spark trap behind him, just enough to blind one of them. The blast worked, and the first mercenary shouted as his visor cracked. Dax pounced, driving his blade into a joint between armor plates. The merc dropped with a grunt, dead weight on the floor. The others opened fire, red bolts slicing past Dax. As he ducked back, he had to draw them away. "Give the girls a chance," he shouted. "This way, cowards," and ran down the alley. Three chased him, boots pounding metal. The alleys twisted like a maze, and Dax knew them better than most. He turned corners, leaped broken walls, and used steam vents to block their vision. Every step bought the girls more time. Back in the shelter, Zari trembled beside her sister. "Is he coming back?" she whispered. Lyra's voice was soft but strong. "He will." Zari looked around the broken space, then crawled toward the sidewall. "If he doesn't, we run." "No," Lyra said, grabbing her arm. "Not yet, not until he says outside." Dax slid to a stop near a collapsed stairwell. One of the bounty hunters caught up, aiming his rifle. "You're not even worth the blood they'll pay us for." The alien spat. "Funny," Dax said, flicking a shard of glass into the aliens. I.e., the shot went wide, and Dax surged forward, taking him down in 2 sharp strikes. Another turned and bolted. Calling for backup, Dax didn't chase. He ran back to the shelter, breathing heavy. He slid inside, just as Lyra rose to her feet. Eyes narrowed. "We need to go now," she said. Dax nodded, helping them both up. "There's a vent line under the floor. It leads to the lower alleys." They moved quickly, Zari squeezing through the narrow tunnel first, Lyra behind her, and Dax last. He sealed the hatch just as red light swept the room above them. The hunters were back and angry. The tunnel was dark and tight, water dripping from overhead pipes. They crawled for what felt like hours, finally emerging into an old waste corridor under the industrial district. Machines hummed nearby, unused and forgotten. Dax helped the girls up and checked for signs of pursuit. Zari was crying softly, and Lyra looked ready to collapse again. Dax picked her up without a word and carried her through the rusted corridors. They found an old freight elevator barely working and rode it to the next level. They stepped out into a new section of Zell Triac's wider alleys, darker shadows, and fewer watchers. Dax led them to a shuttered storefront with broken windows and barred doors. "I used to know the guy who owned this," he said. "Might still have some use inside." He patched the door and stacked junk in front of it. Then he turned to "The girls, you both okay?" Zari nodded slowly. "I'm scared, but I'm okay." Lyra forced a weak smile. "You're fast for a human." Dax chuckled. "Used to be a soldier?" Lyra blinked. "Used to be?" "War's over, for me at least," he said, then looked down at them. "Not sure I can say the same for you." Zari whispered. "Why are they chasing us? We were just animals to them before." Lyra looked away, then finally said it. "Because there's something in our blood." Dax froze. "What do you mean?" "We were bred in labs," Lyra continued. "Long ago, before we escaped.
Ow.
Our kind wasn't just pretty faces and soft fur. We were meant to be weapons." Dax felt cold. He sat down slowly and looked at them again. Not just as victims, but as targets with something powerful inside them, something worth killing for. Zari curled beside her sister and whispered, "They won't stop, will they?" No, Dax said. They won't. Not unless we make them. He stood, walked to the dusty shelves and pulled out an old combat stim kit. His hands moved with practiced speed, preparing for the next fight. He wasn't just a broke man with a broken past anymore. He had something worth protecting again. Secrets in their blood. Asterisk, the older one, didn't bleed like other species. Her blood shimmered like silver fire under Dax's fingers. He froze as he cleaned the wound on Lyra's side. The gash was deep, but it wasn't the injury that made his. Hands pause. It was the glow, faint and shifting like light on water. Silver blood didn't just happen. Not in real species. Not without gene work. Zari stared too, her voice small and scared. That's why they want us. Dax looked up. You? Said, something's in your blood. What exactly are you? Lyra turned her head slowly, her eyes dim from pain but sharp with memory. We were made, not born. Created in a lab funded by 100 Silent Hands corporations, governments, maybe even the Empire itself. We were designed to be spies, assassins. Perfect pets with claws hidden under silk. Zari hugged herself and whispered. But we escaped before the training began. We were just kids. Dax stepped back, his mind racing. He had heard rumors during his military days, illegal hybrid programs, stolen DNA, enhanced breeding, but nothing solid. If even half of what they said was true, these girls weren't just victims. They were living evidence. Lyra sat up, wincing. They started hunting us once they realized we couldn't. Be controlled. How many of you are there? Dax asked. Not many left, she replied. Most of us were sold off, butchered, or recaptured. A wave of cold hit Dax's chest. If someone traced him here, they'd send more than bounty hunters next time. They'd send people with orders. To erase the whole building, he got up and began sealing the windows with scrap metal. His hands moved fast now, mind focused. We need those trackers out of your body now. Lyra looked down at her ankle. Can you do it? I know someone who can, Dax said. Old smuggler turned medic. Owes me for a mess on Talvin X. But we don't have any money, Zari whispered. He doesn't care about credits, Dax said, loading up his tools and tucking an old map under his arm. He cares about favors, and I saved his brother once. The journey to the medic's lair wasn't easy. They moved through sewage lines, cargo tunnels, and dead elevator shafts. Every few minutes, Dax stopped to check. For trackers or sensors, Lyra could barely walk, so he carried her most of the way, never complaining when they arrived. The door was guarded by a wall of rust and laser wire. A red light scanned Dax's face, then the door creaked open with a groan. Inside stood a skinny, lizard-like alien with 3 arms and sharp teeth. Dax, you old idiot, he said. What did you drag in this time? 2 girls with bombs in their legs, Dax replied. Can you help? The medic Ket squinted at them and hissed, You brought Gene Bloods here? You're insane, probably, Dax said. But you owe me, remember? Ket growled. But motioned them inside. He strapped Lyra to a table and scanned her leg. His expression changed when the scanner read the data chip buried in the bone. This isn't just a tracker, he muttered. It's a kill switch. Zari gasped and grabbed her sister's hand. Dax stayed calm, but gripped his knife tighter. Can you get it out? Ket nodded slowly. But if I slip, she dies in seconds. Then don't slip, Dax said. The room filled with the hum of machines and the smell of burnt metal. Ket worked with tiny tools and shaking claws. It took almost an hour, but finally, he dropped the bloodied chip into a sealed jar. One down, he said. Now, the little one. Zari cried quietly as the process began. Lyra, though weak, held her hand and kept whispering, Brave, you're brave, over and over. Until it was done, when both girls were bandaged and resting, Dax stepped into the back room with Ket. How bad is it? He asked. Ket poured a drink and muttered, You're carrying 2 living war crimes. The moment someone finds out they're alive and untagged, you'll have bounty squads, empire dogs, and gene harvesters on your tail. Too late to turn back, Dax said. I figured, Ket said with a sigh. So I called in a favor of my own. Dax froze. What did you do? Ket looked at him with wide eyes. Someone needs to move you off-world. I contacted a smuggler who still runs stealth flights. She'll meet you tomorrow night at the West Tunnel under Dock 9. And the price? Dax asked. She doesn't. Want money? Ket said. She wants a promise that if you make it out, you tell your story. Dax didn't speak for a moment. Then he nodded. I will. When he returned to the girls, Zari was sleeping, and Lyra was staring at the ceiling. What did he say? She asked. Dax knelt beside her. We leave tomorrow. Off-world. Somewhere safer. Nowhere is safe, she said softly. Then I'll make it safe, he replied. Even if I have to burn a planet to do it, she reached out and touched his arm, her fingers light but warm. You don't have to do this. I already did, he said with a tired smile outside, unseen and distant. A signal beacon blinked to life. It transmitted to a ship in orbit, cold and silent, waiting, and deep inside that ship. A voice crackled awake and whispered, The Gunbloods have resurfaced. The hunt had just begun. The refuge of ghosts, the train car was dead and full of shadows. But it moved like a ghost through the old freight tunnels beneath Zell Triax. Dax crouched near the back, watching the flickering lights overhead. The smell of rust, old oil, and forgotten blood filled the air. Zari slept against his chest, and Lyra leaned weakly beside him, wrapped in an old blanket. The city above still hunted them, but for now, they were ghosts too. They had slipped into the freight network just after midnight, right before the bounty patrols swept the outer zones. Ket's contact had delivered a key code that unlocked the abandoned rail system. No guards, no cameras, just tunnels and dust. But that didn't mean they were alone. Dax kept one hand on his weapon and the other near Zari. The silence wasn't peace, it was warning. Where are we going? Lyra asked quietly. To the lower colony rings, Dax said. A place called Cradle 9. It used to be a mining zone. Now it's home to outlaws, broken machines. And people who disappeared on purpose. Lyra's ears twitched. Sounds like a graveyard it is, Dax said. That's why no one looks there, when the train slowed near the broken gate. Dax pulled them close. Stay quiet, no lights, no sound. They jumped off and landed in black sludge and old metal bones. The air was colder down here, the kind that sank into skin and stayed. Dax led them through the ruined station, every wall tagged with warnings in languages long forgotten. Zari stepped over a smashed drone and whispered, This place feels wrong. That's the point, Dax said. Most folks feel it and turn around. They passed under fallen beams and through halls lit only by broken panels. Finally, they reached a sealed door half covered in cables and warning signs. Dax tapped a code into the side panel, buzzed angrily, then opened with a wheeze. Behind. The door was darkness, but not empty darkness, breathing darkness. A voice called from the shadows, soft and sharp. Password. Dax spoke 2 words in a forgotten dialect. The voice paused, then said, Come in. But bring no lies. The light flicked on, revealing a hidden chamber with patched walls. Solar panels and strange weapons, dozens of eyes blinked from corners. Hybrids, machine men, and things that didn't belong anywhere else. The refuge of ghosts, a tall woman with one metal leg and glowing yellow eyes stepped forward. Dax, she said with a smile, still collecting strays. Dax nodded. I need safe ground. For them, the woman looked at Lyra and Zari. Her eyes narrowed, and her smile faded. Gene bloods. They didn't ask to be born, Dax said. They just want to live. Living has a price here. She replied, I'll pay it, he said. She studied him for a moment, then stepped aside. Then welcome back to the dead. The refuge was a place of stories and scars. Some called it a myth, a home for broken things. But inside it breathed like a secret city. Hidden between rusted corridors and collapsed tunnels, Dax had helped build part of it during his post-war years before the galaxy forgot his name. Now, he brought the girls to his old quarters, tiny, quiet, and filled with dust. He cleaned off the beds and set down what little supplies they had. Lyra sat on the edge and looked at the cracked ceiling. You built this? She asked me and a few ghosts, he said. Zari touched the wall, finding carvings of strange animals and stars who lived here. Runaways, survivors, some rebels, some monsters, Dax replied. All of them had nowhere else to go. Later that night, as Lyra rested and Zari slept, Dax met with the woman again near the outer walls. She looked out over the dark pit. That led deeper into the mines. They'll come, Dax, she said. The Empire won't let those girls vanish. I know, he said, but I've seen worse odds. You could leave, she said. Go now, while the tunnels are still clear. I'm not leaving them, he said simply. She sighed. Aid. Then you'll need more than old ghosts. You'll need fire. Dax nodded, then, show me where to. Light it the next day, he trained with the hybrids in the lower halls Mushin-born fighters, rogue synths and creatures made for war. Lyra watched him from a distance. Her eyes filled with something between fear and wonder. Zari joined. A group of young ones learning to shoot pulse bolts. For the first time since her capture, Zari laughed, just once, quick and soft. But it was real that night. As silence fell over the refuge, a cold wind swept through the tunnels. Bringing with it the scent of ash and smoke, Dax stood at the edge of the gate, looking toward the dark beyond. He didn't see them yet, but he knew they were coming. And when they did, they wouldn't find slaves. They would find fighters. The price of freedom, *, the alarm didn't scream. It whispered on in the refuge of ghosts. Whispers meant death was near. Dax sat upright, grabbing his knife before his eyes were fully open. The cold metal of the floor pressed against his feet. As he moved toward the corridor, the lights had shifted from their usual dim orange to a pale, pulsing white. That color only meant one thing: breach detected. He rushed back and woke the girls up. Now, both of you, Zari blinked sleep away, and clutched her sister's hand. Lyra sat up with a sharp breath, pain flickering across her face. Is it them? She asked. Yes, Dax said. Too soon, they must have traced the old rail lines. Footsteps thundered overhead as fighters scrambled to their posts. The metal-legged woman, Mara, appeared at the doorway. Armed and armored, they sent. A warden, Dax, she said. Empire elite, not bounty hunters, not mercs. This one's clean, legal, and loaded. Dax's jaw tightened. Then this won't be a warning shot. They're here to erase, Mara nodded. You can run still. Side tunnel opens in 7 minutes. No, Dax said, drawing his blade. And checking his sidearm, we make our stand here. Lyra tried to rise, but staggered. Zari caught her. We'll fight too, she said, voice shaking. Dax crouched beside them, looking into Zari's eyes. Only if I fall, understand? He said. Zari didn't nod, but her grip tightened. As Mara led the defense force to the upper sector, Dax stayed behind with the sisters, helping them through the narrow secondary tunnel that led toward the control hub. There they could seal off the inner refuge and trap the attackers between steel and fire. They reached the hub as lights above turned red. Dax handed Zari a compact detonator and showed her where to press. Only if they break the gate, he said, not before then. Came the sound of boots on metal. Steady and calm, not rushed, the warden had arrived. Dax stepped into the main chamber where Mara waited with a small squad behind her. Rebels and hybrids stood ready. Some trembling, some steady, all armed, all silent. The warden entered alone. Tall and wrapped in smooth, dark armor, a silver helmet covered his face. And 2 drones hovered behind his shoulders, scanning the room. I am Warden Selk, he said, his voice like stone. Return the stolen experiments, and no one else. Has to die there, not property, Dax replied, stepping forward. They're people, and they're under my protection. You're not authorized to speak for them, Selk said. You are not registered as legal guardian, protector, or representative. Stand aside. I'm authorized by choice. Dax said. Their choice. The warden raised one hand. Then you've chosen death. Plasma fire erupted as the room turned into chaos. Drones unleashed stun waves while rebels fired from behind barricades. Mara threw a charged spear that shattered one of the drones. And Dax rolled behind a beam, shooting through smoke. Selk moved like shadow. Too fast, too precise. Each motion was calculated, ending with one rebel down, then another, his blade sliced air and bone alike. Unstoppable, Dax met him mid-charge, their weapons clashing with sparks. Selk's strength was beyond human. But Dax had something else rage. You butcher children. Dax growled. You call it law. Selk said nothing, only struck harder. Each blow drove Dax back. But he held ground, then found his chance an exposed joint in the warden's shoulder. He stabbed deep, twisting the blade, and Selk hissed. Mara fired 2 shots into Selk's side as he turned, buying Dax a second to kick him back into a collapsing support beam. Sparks flew, the warden dropped, but not dead. Not yet, meanwhile. Zari crouched in the control hub, hearing every blast through the walls. She looked at the detonator in her hand, trembling. Please let them win, she whispered. Lyra touched her arm. No matter what happens, she said softly, you run, you survive. No, Zari said through tears, not without you. Outside, Selk stood again, bloodied, but not broken. He raised his blade and stepped toward Daxton. Mara lunged from the side and drove a shock rod into his back. Electricity burst, Selk howled, and Dax fired his last bolt straight into his exposed visor. The warden dropped. Smoke filled the air. Bodies lay broken. And the chamber was silent again. Dax dropped to one knee. Gasping, Mara leaned beside him. He almost killed all of us. He didn't, Dax said, because we didn't run. He returned to the hub where the girls waited. Zari threw herself into his arms, crying with relief. Lyra touched his shoulder, her eyes soft. You stayed always, he whispered, but as Mara examined Selk's remains, her eyes widened. Inside his armor was a small communicator still blinking red, transmitting. She called out to Dax, voice cold. This wasn't the main strike, she said. He was just the message. Dax understood what it meant. The real war was coming next. Asterisk Rise of the Forgotten. Asterisk It began with a broadcast no one admitted sending, but everyone heard. The hologram burst from broken screens and dusty projectors across Zell Triax. A grainy image of the warden's lifeless body flickered in blue light above it. Bold alien script translated to every language in the city. They were made to kneel, but they chose to stand. Join them, or be ruled forever, Dax stood with Mara in the command chamber of the refuge, watching the signal loop again and again. That wasn't from us, Mara said quietly. No, Dax replied. But someone wants a war. Lyra entered slowly, still limping from her wounds. It's too late for hiding, isn't it? Dax looked at her. It was never about hiding. It was about surviving long enough to matter. Zari joined them, holding a datapad full of new messages. We're getting calls from across the colony, she said. Hybrids, outlaws even. Ex-slaves they want to fight. Mara raised an eyebrow. Fight for what? These tunnels? These scraps? Dax turned to the wall and tore down a faded star map. Not for tunnels, for each other. For the ones who still live in cages. By nightfall, the refuge had changed. Rusted weapons were polished, old training rooms reopened, and silence turned. To preparation, the lost and the broken were learning how to stand again. Dax moved among them, training with calm but fire in his veins. He showed them how to aim, how to strike, how to fall and get back up. He taught them what the Empire had once taught him, only this time. The right way. Zari proved quick with small weapons, darting between cover like a shadow. Lyra focused on coordination, drawing up patrol paths and fallback points, her mind sharp despite the scars in her blood. The older hybrids, some half-machine, some bred for war. Watched Dax with something close to awe. He wasn't just a protector anymore. He was becoming a leader. On the 4th night, a scout returned with news. The auction house is active again, he reported. They're bringing in more hybrids, children mostly, new captives. Zari's hands clenched. That's where they took us. Lyra's voice was ice. Then that's where we end it. Mara frowned. It's suicide. You know that. They'll be ready for an attack. They weren't ready for us the first time, Dax said. They still think we're scared. They still think we're prey. A plan formed, fast and desperate, but filled with fire. They would strike at night, split into 3 squads. One would hit the power grid. Another would cut reinforcements. The third Dax, Lyra, Zari, and a handful of the best fighters would breach the auction floor and free everyone. Before the launch, Dax stood before them, looking at every face, young and old, scarred and scared. "We're not born to fight," he said, "but we've been forced to, again and again, and tonight. We don't fight to survive, we fight so others don't have to." They moved through the tunnels like shadows, silent and focused. The auction facility stood above the city's Koran-armored tower filled with lights. Wealth and death inside, beings from across the galaxy gathered to bid on bodies like livestock. But this night, they would bid with screams. The first squad struck the grid, plunging the tower into darkness. Alarms wailed, lights flickered, and guards scrambled, not knowing where to look. The second team jammed comes and blew out the transport paths, trapping the auction in its own walls. Dax's team stormed the side entrance, bypassing locks and gunning down mercs in seconds. Lyra covered Zari as she hacked the containment fields. One by one, cages opened and frightened hybrids stepped out, blinking, unsure if they were dreaming. "It's real," Zari said. "You're free. Run now. Fight if you can, but live." Guards rallied at the top floor, forming a wall of armor and fire. But Dax didn't stop. Not when he had a blade in his hand and reason in his heart. He led the charge, dodging blasts, cutting down slavers, and shielding the others. In the center chamber, the auction master, a bloated creature with cybernetic limbs, screamed as the rebels burst through. "You can't do this. This is sanctioned." Lyra raised her stolen rifle and said, "Not anymore." She fired. The tower burned as they escaped through the smoke, hundreds of hybrids behind them, cheering, crying, some carrying others, some holding weapons for the first time in their lives. They returned to the refuge with the rising sun behind them. Bruised, bloodied, but not broken, Mara stood at the gates, eyes wide as she counted the survivors. "You actually did it." Dax looked back at the smoking tower in the distance. "Not just me," he said, "all of them." Lyra stood beside him, her hand finding his, without a word. Zari watched the new arrivals. It's already showing some how to hold a weapon properly. The forgotten were no longer forgotten. They were rising. The last bid, asterisk, the galaxy watched in silence. But one system didn't look away, it sent warships instead. Above Zeltriax, Empire cruisers darkened the sky like storm clouds. Their engines roared low, deep enough to shake buildings and bones. The rebellion had drawn blood, and now the masters of the auction house came to clean it. Dax stood on a rooftop with Lyra and Zari, wind pushing against his coat. He could see the glowing underbellies of the ships and the shimmer of drop pods. "Falling from orbit? They're not here to negotiate," he said. Lyra narrowed her eyes, her silver blood still warm beneath her skin. "They're here to erase us." Zari didn't flinch. "Not anymore. Let's give them a reason to fail." Back inside the refuge, fighters prepared for what they believed might be the last stand. Kids who once trembled in cages now loaded rifles. Hybrids once sold like meat now stood shoulder to shoulder in battle lines. The old tunnels had become trenches, every dark corner. Now a fortress of will. Mara stepped beside Dax, holding a plasma cannon. "You gave them a dream." "Don't let it die tonight." "I won't," Dax said, "but we may not all make it." "Then we'll be remembered," she said with fire in her voice. The first drop pods landed in the industrial zone. Armored soldiers spilling out like poison, they moved in squads, scanning, burning, clearing the edges of the district. Dax didn't wait for them to get close. He sent the signal, and the ambush began. Explosives hidden in trash heaps blasted entire units into the air. Snipers in shadow picked off the Empire's command leads. Rebels fought like wolves, fast, precise and angry. Dax led from the front. Blade in one hand, sidearm in the other, the battle stretched for hours, smoke choking the sky, fires lighting every corridor. Lyra fought beside him, silent and focused. Her movements graceful but deadly. Zari worked the come station, relaying positions, warning units, holding the network together with nothing but grit and a sharp mind. Then came the voice, deep and unnatural, echoing from speakers planted across the city. "Dax of Earth," it said, "return the experiments, and you may die quickly. Dax grabbed the nearest speaker wire and replied, "Come and take them, if you dare." The final wave came in the form of an Empire executioner, a towering enforcer bred for death, covered in obsidian armor. Standing nearly twice Dax's height, it tore through the barricades with a shock hammer. Crushing 3 fighters in seconds, Dax faced it alone, blocking the path to the final tunnel where the children had been evacuated. His arm bled, his chest ached, but he stood firm. The executioner laughed. "A hollow electric sound, you're only human," it said. Dax looked it in the eye and smiled. "That's why I win." He ducked the first swing, rolled forward, and stabbed his blade into the enforcer's knee joint. The creature howled, swung again, but Dax used his smaller size to stay close. Too close for the hammer to reach, with a final burst of strength. He shoved a grenade under the armor plate and kicked away. The blast sent both of them flying. Dax hit the wall and fell hard. Everything going dark. When he awoke, Lyra was leaning over him, her hands bloody, her eyes wet. "You idiot," she said gently. "You lived." "Of course I did," he whispered. "I still had something to protect." Later, in the ruins of what was once the Empire's proudest hunting ground, survivors gathered beneath the broken stars. No more cages, no more collars, only names and new futures. Dax stood before them, wrapped in bandages, Lyra on one side, Zari on the other. Behind him stood hybrids of every kind alien, animal, machine, all free. Zari stepped forward with a datapad. "Transmission complete," she said. "We sent the footage everywhere, the auctions, the bloodlines. The kills they've been exposed, all of it." Lyra looked at the crowd and raised her voice. "No one will sell us again." Dax didn't say anything at first. He just looked out at the faces, the ones who followed, the ones who fought, the ones who refused to be erased. Then he finally spoke, voice steady. "We were sold like meat, but now we choose who we are and what we are as family." The crowd roared with voices once silenced, fists raised, tails twitching, ears lifted, hope rising, in a galaxy that once forgot them. They had made themselves unforgettable.